Mr. President, let's talk a little bit about 2012. We've talked about 2011. Have you begun to focus in on some priorities for the 2012 session?
Well, the number one priority is the same as last year. Balanced budget, do not raise taxes, do not raise fees, so you offer stability and predictability to a very weak economy here in the state of Florida. We believe we need to show that to entrepreneurs, to existing business leaders, and hopefully that will attract new businesses to the state of Florida. So that's priority number one.
Let me ask you a question about that. We heard not too long ago that from forecasters that the economy was not looking as shaky, certainly as it did going into 2011. What are you hearing now?
Well, the good news, of course, is that we have that balanced budget. Our AAA bond rating was strengthened from unstable to stable, but I think we're all recognizing right now, over the last month or two with the stock market dip, that our numbers are being affected by that as well. So what we're hoping for, of course, is a balance, meaning no further cuts, but unfortunately with the recent slide down over the last summer months, we might see again some additional cuts coming up, which is not what we'd like to see, but we're planned, we're ready to go if in case we needed to.
Okay. Okay, we got a balanced budget, no taxes, that's a top priority. Any other issues that are coming up to the top of the mind awareness?
Well, I think that more than anything else is, again, continually move red tape out of the way for business owners. This is not about taking away protection. This is about taking away redundancy. And I think the governor's offered some very strong suggestions about how we remove multiple layers of red tape. So if the local government, I mean, the cities, the counties, and the state are all doing the same thing, let's pick one agency out of those three to do the checks and then move on, as opposed to three different layers. The governor's already outlined multiple opportunities for red tape being removed. We'll build on the success from last session. I think that will be one of the big focal points. Sadly, the other big point will be reapportionment with the changing the lines.
I wanted to ask you about that. This happens every 10 years, of course, after the census, and Amendments 5 and 6 passed, which were attempts to reduce gerrymandering for both the congressional seats and state House and Senate seats. But everybody's in Tallahassee saying, well, there'll still be gerrymandering and all of that. Do you think that the legislature can wind up drawing the boundaries for all of these different seats in Congress and the state and House and Senate seats without it winding up eventually in court?
Well, first, it has to go through the courts, as you know.
Right.
But I think we can, and here's why. One is, I know that the term gerrymandering, I teach at the college level, I'm very familiar with the term, but let's just put one fact out there that a lot of viewers might not know. In the Florida Senate currently, there are 28 Republicans, 12 Democrats. What might shock a lot of people is that Barack Obama won 20 out of the 40 Senate seats when he ran for President of the United States in 2008. So to say it's gerrymandering, you need to look a little closer to the lines. But that said, one of the things we've kept as a tradition here in the Senate, remember at property tax reforms, we went across the state and listened to Floridians before we made that policy. Medicaid reforms, much the same way. Same thing with reapportionment. We went out and held 26 meetings across the state, asked for a lot of input from people, how we should draw the lines. There's already, I believe, over 60 maps that have been submitted by citizens across the state. That will improve the process so people have a true voice in the process. But I think it'll be incredibly difficult because, in my opinion, Amendments 5 and 6 have some contradictory elements to it, but with the leadership of Don Gates, our incoming president, the leadership of Will Weatherford, the incoming speaker, I am absolutely confident there will be maps out before the end of the year that all Floridians can look at and see that they're drawn fairly, and more importantly, that all Floridians had a voice.
What do you say to those critics who say, well, the hearings on redistricting around the state were really kind of a show, there was no real input, there was no real statements by the people who were on the committees, no real to and fro. What do you think about that?
Well, it's politics. That's what I think it is. And it's
Really?
expected. And 10 years ago, what did they say? Why you draw the maps before you gave us input? I mean, it's part of the process, and I get that. Again, let's be consistent here. What did we do with Medicaid and property taxes? We went out and listened to people, then drew up their legislation. That shows the ultimate respect for the voter, and I think we'll do much the same this year. Once we draw those maps, we'll go out and get more input again from the voter.
All right, speaking of politics, you're a student of politics. You're certainly involved in politics. You're a professor of politics. Let's talk politics for a few minutes, if I might. The race for the United States Senate in Florida, you're intimately familiar with that. In the final analysis, Will the Democratic incumbent Bill Nelson be hard to beat?
Absolutely, it'd be very difficult. As I was engaged in the race, I think he's a very tough competitor. He's been in office since I was 2 years old. A lot of people know who he is. And he's been seen as a conservative Democrat. I would disagree with what people are seeing him as, but he'll be tough to beat. Plus, he's going to raise over $20 million. There's going to be a bruising Republican primary. What I hope that whoever the eventual nominee is for my party, the Republican Party, will talk about not just what Nelson's done wrong or President Obama's done wrong. Let's be the party of better ideas. That's why I think Marco Rubio found success. He was inspirational as opposed to bringing everyone down to a lowest common denominator. But I think Nelson will be tough to beat. I consider him a strong favorite still. But I think he can be beaten, especially if Obama's numbers continue to slide.
I want to follow up on something that you just said. You know, the Republicans are being criticized at the national level and so forth as the party of no, and being depicted that way. It could be unfair, but nevertheless, that is the way Republicans are depicted. And you just said, you know, candidates for the United States Senate and otherwise, need to come forward with Republican candidates need to come forward with a positive agenda. Talk a little bit more about that. Well,
to me, that's everything. As I was on the trail over the summer, I wasn't talking bad about my fellow Republicans. I was inspirational. I want to talk about positive ideas. Just to talk about the legislation we spoke about in the first part of your show. Pension reform, education reform, the idea of welfare reform, Medicaid reform, a balanced budget amendment, spending limits. That's reform-oriented. That's positive. That's inspirational. You know, I don't want to just sit there and badmouth someone. Let's talk about better ideas. And I think that's where our focus needs to be. Whether it be Mitt Romney or Rick Perry, whoever our nominee as president, let's talk about what we would do as the President of the United States or a member of the United States Senate to turn around this economy, not just yell at the TV. That's what should separate us, and I hope Washington takes more of that focus.
Well, you know, a lot of people are predicting that this is going to be one of the most negative campaigns for president and maybe throughout the nation for United States Senate post and Congress and so forth. Do you agree with that?
It will be incredibly negative, and I think that's disappointing. That's where modern politics is. But it doesn't mean you have to be a part of the problem. And so what I've always tried to do, whether it be on this show or on our press avails, more importantly our policies, is to talk about being the party of better ideas. I think at the end of the day, you might score some points politically by being negative or get a crowd reaction, but we need to transform this country, modernize the federal government like we've tried to modernize the state government. And I think that's the direction the party needs to go. That's what I've been speaking about. I think that's what Don Gates is talking about as our new Senate president.
Can President Obama, in the final analysis, win Florida?
I think he could definitely win Florida, and I still consider, again, him the favorite as the presidential candidate. You know, everyone sees his declining numbers for all the right reasons, sadly, but at the end of the day, it's going to be person against person, whether it be man and woman, whether it be two men running for president of the United States. And he won the Jacksonville mayor's race. He won the Tampa mayor's race.
When you say he won those races, what do you mean by that?
What I mean is the Democrat Party ran outstanding races in Tampa and Jacksonville, really a big upset in the Jacksonville mayor's race, and it shows that they still have a very good get-out-the-vote operation, especially in presidential election years. And President Obama is going to raise over $1 billion, and there's going to be a very, very contentious Republican primary to pick our nominee as a Republican. And he is the President of the United States. It is still very difficult to beat an incumbent president. Right now, things look very good. But as you know, a year is a lifetime in politics, and he's still a gifted orator. He has a very devoted following, and I think it'll be a very close race. And that's why I want us to be talking about better ideas, not just denigrating the president. That's what happened in 1996. That's why Bill Clinton got reelected, because it was just all anti-Clinton. Bob Dole needed to talk about inspirational ideas. We didn't go that direction, and we lose.
All right, let's talk about the Republican race for the presidency. Let's talk about that in relation to Florida. Do you have any thoughts about who might be the best candidate for Florida on the Republican side?
Well, I think we've all seen that it's probably going to come down to two people now. It looks like Mitt Romney and, of course, Rick Perry have kind of emerged as the favorites at this point. I think both would do well in the Republican primary. It seems like Perry, at least at this point, seems like the more conservative, whereas Mitt Romney might be that better general election candidate. But what I'd like to see now that we had a full preliminary rounds of these debates, let's really engage in the ideas. and let's define what you would do as president of the United States. I think both of those men have a great chance to beat President Obama because they've been executives, they've run major campaigns. But I think that's where it's going to emerge. And right here in Florida, with Presidency 5, this will be one of the key states. That's why Dean Cannon, Rick Scott, and I all wanted to have Florida early in that presidential primary list because Florida will most likely decide the presidency in November of 2012. We want to have a big say in who the Republican nominee.
Talk a little bit for people who might not understand the importance of blocking and tackling. You talked about in politics, you talked about President Obama raising $1 billion, and we know that Florida is going to be critical in terms of the Electoral College. Talk about the ground game of politics and what Obama is likely to commit in Florida, and maybe Republicans, to getting out the vote and how all that works in a presidential campaign.
Well, getting out the vote is huge. We saw in 2012 a lot of depressed Democrat voters. They did not get motivated and not get out the vote, and thus huge win for Republicans just last year. But the getting out the vote idea is getting people on the phone, getting the buses out there, making sure that, again, there's enough direct mail to educate voters and where they're at. My expectation in talking with the experts is that the Democrats are going to spend over $100 million on this get out the vote type operation. This means, again, the phone calls. That means going out and motivating people. That means registering people to vote so they're eligible to vote. And doing the early voting. Democrats have really excelled in recent years on early voting, where Republicans have always excelled on absentee ballots. So that's where the focus is going to be. Republicans are going to try to up their game on the early vote. The Democrats are going to try to up their game and get more people out to vote.
Thank you, Mr. President. We've enjoyed it.
Thank you, Steve. Always a pleasure.